Now that we have come to the end of the drama, remember we discussed the plot, the sequence of events. We also examined the different characters, the vices, the virtues that they exhibited, and we also need to understand the various themes. So when you go into the examination, you should have knowledge of all of those aspects of the drama. Ideally, you should also know what happens in each act and in each scene. So as mentioned earlier, I said in order to help facilitate your memory, you could give each act a title, for example, so that you know what happens in a particular scene. So in Act 1, we said something is rotten in the state of Denmark. So you are aware that something is awry, there is something wrong, and that we know that the ghost then makes an appearance, and we know later find out, for example, that Claudius is king and he married his brother's widow very shortly after his brother had died. So given all of that, we now then move into the exam. One of the important things in the examination to do is you need to understand that for all questions, you need to justify your responses. And you justify your responses by referring closely to events in the text. So it is a matter of also, secondly, unpacking your questions. Examine your questions, unpack them. What does it mean? You analyze it. You take your highlighter and you highlight what are the aspects that this question expects me as a person being tested, as a student. What does it expect me, or how does it expect me to answer? So what you need to do is you also need to scaffold your answers. We will focus on strategies to answer contextual examination questions. So in the exam, the examiner poses typical questions, which you will find if you study exam papers of different years. There definitely will be what I call CPT questions. So CPT stands for character, plot, and theme questions. So there will be questions on all of these aspects. Sometimes you will be asked questions on merely just the characters, or there will be combination questions as well. So what are your typical character questions? Number one, you could be asked, what does the extract reveal about the character? Number two, how is or are the character's action consistent with or different to the actions in other parts of the novel? So once again, you need to know your plot. Third option, how does the character's action contribute to events which transpire later in the novel or drama? So what does this mean? Is that you examine the scene that has been demonstrated, or you examine the scene in the extract that has been given, and you state, look, identify what the character's actions are, and then you basically just determine what happens later on in the drama, and whether the action here in this particular scene contributes to action which occurs later. Number four, you have to suggest what it is that motivates a character to utter certain words or to commit certain deeds. So given all of that, you really need to have a good understanding of your character. You need to have, for example, for yourself, a list of characteristics or character traits exhibited by the character. On the screen in front of you, you have a typical exam question based on a specific character. So let's examine the question, which has been extracted from an old question paper. You will obviously, in the contextual question, you will have an extract from the drama, and it will quite be more detailed than the one we have here. What you do need to take note of is that right at the bottom of the extract, the examiner will place the text in a particular context. For example, in this case, there are the words Act 1, Scene 2. So that is an indication that this extract has been taken from Act 1, Scene 2. This is very important because it gives you a sense of where in the drama the extract has been taken from, so that you also know what has happened before this and what events will happen after this, as well as what takes place in the extract that has been selected. So what is your first step then? You obviously read the question, you refer to line 1, good Hamlet cast, note the ellipsis, knighted colour off. Now, the examiner does not want to quote the entire lines or all the lines, all the words in these lines. Sometimes they quote, for example, they refer to 4 or 5 lines. So what the examiner does is uses the ellipsis to indicate that there is something missing there. So in fact, what you do is you go into the original quote and then you refer to the entire line or lines as indicated. So it is good Hamlet cast, knighted colour off. That's your quote. How does this line reflect Hamlet's frame of mind at this stage in the drama? So go to the line itself. Good Hamlet, cast thy knighted colour off. So your first step would be to unpack the question or the instruction. Your question normally consists of a statement and then it is followed by an instruction. So what must you do? What is your instruction? You must reflect on, in other words, explain Hamlet's frame of mind. And when at this particular stage, what is this particular stage? For example, in Act 1, Scene 2. Now you examine key words in your quotation, because these words will then guide or inform your opinion that you have stated or you're supposed to state. So what are the key words? It is knighted color. The knighted color refers to the color black. What does it symbolize? It symbolizes that Hamlet is in deep mourning for his father and is possibly depressed because we know that his mother has married his uncle very shortly after his father's sudden death. At this stage, his mother is reprimanding him for displaying excessive grief, and he responds bitterly, implying that his grief is sincere. And step 3, you now compose your response. And remember, by now, most educators or teachers are using the 3-point formula where we look at your point that you make. Hamlet is grief-stricken and depressed. Remember, that's your opinion, that's your point. So what do you now have to do? You have to justify it by taking evidence from the text. The evidence is his knighted color and what it symbolizes. Then your explanation would then follow, and your explanation would be a kind of link between your evidence and your point that you have made or your opinion. So with your explanation, you're basically suggesting how your evidence reinforces or supports your first step, your opinion or point. Here we can say that Hamlet's black clothes is in stark contrast with his mother's attitude that he should stop mourning, and then you will link to why Hamlet is depressed or grief-stricken. Refer to line 1. Here is another example of a question based on character analysis. Good Hamlet, cast thy knighted colour off. The same line suggests what motivates Gertrude to utter these words in the above lines. Note, whereas the first question asked you to reflect on Hamlet's state of mind, this questioner asks you to look at events from Gertrude's perspective. So you have to be very aware of the different constructions of and focus points of the different questions. In the preceding slides, we examined the typical questions based on the qualities exhibited by different characters at various points in the drama. And so now we look at questions which present a combination of plots and characters. So once again, you're going to have an extract from the drama with the examiner indicating where exactly in the drama the extract has been taken from. So the instruction is, or the question is, refer to lines 6 to 8, but to persevere 'tis unmanly grief. So if we look at lines 6 to 8, it basically says, but to persevere in obstinate condolement is a course of impious stubbornness 'tis unmanly grief. So there are 3 lines in total, and as I mentioned earlier, the examiner does not sort of quote all 3 lines because it is unnecessary as the extract is there. I find that sometimes students only focus on the words that have been quoted. So the instruction is, in the light of later events, comment on whether Claudius is being sincere. So your first step is to analyze and unpack the question. And so we look at key points or that are made there, or key words also. So we looked at in the light of later events. What does that mean? It's events which occur at another point in the future. So that's a plot question, or an aspect of plot that we now have to include in our answer. Comment on means that you have to give an opinion. So that is your instruction. Claudius's sincerity. So now we're looking at his character. And sincerity refers to somebody being honest. So your step 2 now, you have to decide, is Claudius sincere or not? And so once you've made that decision, it indeed becomes your first statement. You then look at evidence and examples of events which occur later in the drama to support your opinion. You can use the following examples. You could look at the fact that Claudius killed old Hamlet. He sends Hamlet into exile to England. He plots to have Hamlet executed. He connives with Laertes to kill Hamlet in a duel. So all of those then could be used as evidence, and your last statement would then obviously indicate a clear link between your evidence and how it supports your initial opinion. We've examined typical questions based on characters. We also looked at a combination of questions posed on characters and the plot. So now we're going to focus specifically on your plot questions. The most popular question basically is the one which states, place the above extract in context. And as mentioned in the previous slide, at the bottom of the extract, the examiner will give a reference for the extract. So you must know your plot of your drama or your novel, whatever it may be. So when you are given an extract, you basically reflect about what has happened in the extract, think about when it happened, who was involved, and what also has happened before this extract that has been given to you. So you focus on events inside the extract itself and also what has happened before events in the extract have transpired. This is usually quite a simple question to answer if you are able to identify correctly the position of the extract within the novel or drama. And once again, you need to know the sequence of events in your drama or novel itself. So you provide basically 3 points for 3 marks, which is normally allocated to this question. And this is one of those easy questions where you can actually score decent marks. So know your plot thoroughly. Here we have some more combinations of different questions. And so these can be a combination, once again, of either your character and your plot and your theme questions. So you have 2 possible scenarios. Discuss the significance of or comment on the significance of. Now, when you have to comment on, you have to give your opinion. So what do you need to do in this type or with this type of question? You basically have to look at why is this particular issue Namely, for example, your character's words or their actions in a particular scene. Why is it important or significant? You need to express your opinion or your reaction to the importance of the reference in the particular question. In other words, what does the character's words, actions imply or suggest? So significance refers to the importance. Why is it important? What does it, for example, if you have to comment on the character's actions, why is it important in this particular scene, and how does it impact events later on in the drama? Here's an example. They refer to line, whatever it is, my father's spirit in arms. So here's a quote from the drama. Discuss the significance of King Hamlet's ghost appearing dressed in armor. And so why is it important then? So we can think of importance as relating to the plots, some of the themes that are dealt with. So your answer could refer to the fact that arms refers to the fact that the ghost is wearing armor. And so it seems to suggest that Hamlet is going to be at war later in the drama with himself, reflecting on his inability to act decisively and to avenge his father's death. It can also refer to the war that Hamlet engages with Claudius, because Claudius is responsible for his father's death and also plots against Hamlet. You can also speak about the fact that Denmark itself is in a state of moral decay. So as you notice, we've basically touched on so many different aspects. We've mentioned something about the plot. We've mentioned something about the character. We've also mentioned something about the themes. Most important thing is that if you know your characters and if you know your themes and your plot, you can basically integrate this information into your answers. Other types of questions you get would be where you have to explain something. And in this case, you have to make clear the meaning of something by describing it in more detail or revealing other relevant facts. Or if you're asked to account for, you actually have to give a reason for the statement that has been presented in the question. So here we have examples. And once again, these are straightforward questions. Refer to lines 18 to 20, my too much changed son. Account for the change that has come upon Hamlet. In the next question, refer to lines 4 to 5, I prithee, my mother's wedding. Account for Hamlet's attitude towards his mother's marriage. So this is information that you actually have already, that you know as you're going into the examination. In both instances, you have to list reasons to explain the character's attitude or behavior. So, you know, these are not difficult questions. Once again, you already know why Hamlet has changed. What is the reason for Hamlet's changing? We know that he puts on an antic disposition. He pretends to be mad because he wants to find out whether Claudius is guilty of murdering his father or not, and he hopes that by pretending to be mad, that other characters will drop their guard and also in his presence then divulge very important information which is going to help him seek revenge for his father's murder. We know that Hamlet is disgusted with his mother's marriage because it is an incestuous marriage, since she had married her brother-in-law very shortly after her first husband had died. And in Hamlet's mind, his mother did not mourn his father long enough. So as you can see, there is certain information that you will know and which you can easily respond to. So these are your straightforward questions. In addition to the straightforward questions, you now also get your level 3 questions, which requires you to give an opinion. For example, if the question poses, do you agree? And here you have to present a stance, and you may have to state a definite yes or no. Please note that it doesn't matter what your answer is, you're not going to get a mark for the yes or the no of your response. You are obviously going to get a mark for your justification. So this is a combination question. The above question will usually be followed by the instruction, justify your response. So how do you justify your response? You show or prove your statement to be right or reasonable. And how do you do this? You use evidence or justification from the novel or the drama that you have studied. So here you will focus on some events which occurred and which support the opinion that you've presented. Take a stance, don't waffle, and make sure that the stance you have taken is presented by good supportive evidence. Because sometimes students take a stance, but then they present evidence which is not really convincing. Think of yourself as having to argue or take a stand for something in real life, and how would you convince the listener that the stance that you have taken is the correct one. Sometimes, for example, you are also required to answer a question, and the instruction tells you to base your answer on your knowledge of the novel or the drama as a whole. So what then do you do? So you consider the drama or novel in its totality, in this case, from Act 1 to Act 5 in the drama, and you don't just take into account the extract in front of you. So this question could be based on a theme or a recurring symbol or a character or specific words uttered by the character in the drama or novel. Here below is an example. Refer to line 14. He, and here we refer to old Hamlet, was a goodly king. So using your knowledge of the play as a whole, comment on whether the same can be said about the current king, Claudius. So look at the curveball there. You are not asked to really comment on old Hamlet's ability as a good king, but you actually have to focus on Claudius's character and also whether he makes a good king. So here is your answer. Claudius is far from goodly. We've taken the quote from the question, because he murdered his brother to become king and married his sister-in-law, spied on Hamlet, and plotted to have Hamlet executed. He's not prepared to give up his ill-gotten gains and repent, and he convinces Laertes to kill Hamlet in a duel. Therefore, it is clear that Claudius is in fact evil personified. So looking at good, and when you look at good and evil, you think of sinful acts that the character has committed. In addition to those questions, you often get a question which requires you to see things from the perspective of a director who is in charge of the direction. That means telling actors how to recite their lines and which actions to actually use. Here is an example. Refer to line 5 or 6. O villainy, how seek it out. If you were the director of the production of Hamlet, how would you instruct the actor to deliver these lines? Pay specific attention to their body language and tone. Motivate your instructions. So the extract is there, and we have Gertrude speaking. She says, no, the drink, oh my dear Hamlet, the drink, I am poisoned. And Hamlet says, oh villainy, ho, let the door be locked, treachery, seek it out. And it comes from Act 5, Scene 2. So we know that in Act 5, Scene 2, a lot of action happens. There are deaths. We know that the drink Gertrude refers to is the chalice, which has been filled with poison and had been intended for Hamlet, and that had all been part of Claudius and Laertes' plot. And Hamlet obviously had just been stabbed by Laertes and realizes that he had been indeed deceived. So he wants to lock the door to prevent whoever is guilty of this deception to be trapped inside with him. So what do you need to know? You do need to know your plot. What has occurred to cause the character to act or react in this particular way? What emotions or an emotion is the character experiencing? What tone and actions would the character then use? So it's not you merely just stating what you would tell the character, but you also have to explain, and in order to explain, you need to know the experiences of the character and what he or she is going through. So your answer could be layered as follows. The actor should look around and point to the door. Here we're mentioning body language. He should display an outraged, desperate tone when he commands that the door be locked. You're now giving more details on tone. And so why? So here is your justification then. Hamlet has just discovered that he has been betrayed because Gertrude has died after drinking the poison, and he realizes that he had been duped by Laertes and Claudius, because Claudius's rapier had no foil. So that then is indeed your motivation or justification for saying why the character should use a particular tone and also which actions he should use. Now we come to some of those difficult questions where you actually have to make a critical comment. So a critical comment is basically you giving your opinion on certain events, on certain themes, or on certain actions by various characters. Here's an example. Hamlet's hesitation in taking revenge is a sign of cowardice. And so there, the examiner has made a theme statement, given an opinion. Critically comment on the extent to which you agree with this statement. So here's your instruction. You have to give a critical comment. In other words, you have to take a stance. You also have to say to which extent you agree with the statement. So obviously, when you take a stance, you know that you need to justify your stance by extracting information from the text, and then also in your final statement, it is generally, as I say, a therefore statement where you show how your evidence proves your initial opinion or justifies it. So you firstly state your opinion on the thesis statement, namely, do you agree with the statement? Do you disagree that it is a sign of cowardice, or do you want to agree and disagree? This is often a 4-mark statement, and in a way, it's kind of a mini essay that you are writing. I'm not suggesting that you should write or use half a page to construct your answer, but I am saying that there should be enough details so that you can basically amass the 4 marks. Identify then the relevant reasons and evidence for your stance. Here you have to focus on certain themes, mention certain aspects of the plots and the characters as well. Once again, you need to know this information by heart. So prove why or how your evidence then justifies your stance or opinion. So if you, for example, think it is a sign of cowardice, you can say that Hamlet is indecisive because he basically wants to delay killing Claudius. Perhaps he does not have enough mettle or strength to actually go over into action and actually commit the deed of murder. However, if you want to argue that it is not a sign of cowardice, but it is a sign of a deeply principled individual, then you can argue that as well. You can mention the fact that in Renaissance society, it was acceptable for an individual to seek vengeance or seek revenge in order to exact justice for somebody who has been murdered. However, we also know that the Bible sees murder as something sinful, and because Hamlet is a deeply philosophical, even religious young man, we can understand why he hesitates to murder Claudius. So indeed, we have come to the end of these presentations. Practice as much as you can. Go through old question papers. Have a look at the types of questions that are posed and also look at how those questions are structured. Practice breaking up those questions so that you know in this particular question there are 3 aspects or elements that I have to mention in my answer. Then, in addition to that, study the memoranda. Why do you study the memoranda? Sometimes there is additional information that you have not covered in the various resources that you have been given. And so, in addition to the sources that you've used, you also have additional information about the text itself. Other than that, you also know how to layer your responses. And indeed, when you answer your level 3, 4, and 5 questions, you obviously have to layer those responses. And a lot has to do with you presenting not just your opinion, but in the justification of your opinion. So know that your opinion really does not garner any marks for you, but it is the discussion that you present and the evidence that you present, which will eventually then get you the marks. Good luck, matriculants.